I'm here with Dr. Aaron Wenzel, founder of Brentwood MD. He's somebody who I've known for several years and a personal friend. Aaron, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, tell your story. I'd love to hear about how you got into both medicine and then made the transition from traditional medicine into concierge.
Thanks, Josh. Happy to be here. Always happy to have conversations with you, and certainly always happy to share my story. So I kind of took the road less traveled into medicine. Grew up in Southern California, was an academic underachiever, which led me to the military, the Army, and then after the Army, with a little bit of college money and a new focus on life, rallied and got myself into undergrad, then med school. I did family medicine training outside of Memphis, Tennessee, in Jackson, with the idea that I wanted to be a primary care doctor. I wanted to make a difference. I almost walked away from medicine in my second year of residency because the model that I was practicing in revealed to me that virtually none of my patient experiences were where patients got better. And it really dawned on me that we have a sick care model. And what I was really hoping to participate in is more healthcare. And on the side, during training, I was doing some moonlighting in the emergency room, developed another skill set. And so once residency was completed, I moved to the Nashville area and started working full-time as a traveling emergency room doc with entrepreneurial kind of tendencies that at some point I knew I would want to lean into, but didn't know what that looked like. Fast forward about 8 or 9 years of doing ER full time, I came across the concierge model, and really couldn't believe that it was real.
So
And
let's back up here just for a second. How did you come across this concierge model? And kind of tell me like a little bit of the contrast of, when I'm thinking about it, I think of ER being like this fast-paced, incredibly high volume, very limited patient interaction. You see them one time and ideally probably never see them again or rarely see them again, depending on rotation. But tell me about kind of one, how you heard about concierge medicine, and two, what made you decide to kind of almost go polar opposite end of the spectrum from ER, see somebody once and never again, to build these deep relationships in a concierge model.
yeah, no, I appreciate the clarifying question. I jumped over my very first entrepreneurial journey, which was medical bariatrics. My first revelation in trying to lean into this, I want to build something that has a meaningful impact positively in someone's life, was rooted in this realization that the only people I had ever noticed that improved their health were somehow able to lose weight and keep it off, specifically lose excess body fat. So I became really obsessed with the fat cell. Why do we have it? What would make it? What is its design and function? What would make it grow? What would make somebody be able to shrink it? What would be some of the explainable causes that you couldn't shrink it? And so I became obsessed with the biochemistry, really, of obesity and by extension, metabolic disease. And it was in that experience of about 4 years of running a medical bariatric practice that I met someone who introduced the idea to me, saying, we really love you as one of our doctors, but we would love even more if you would be our doctor. And then they went on to tell me that they had a concierge doctor in Washington, D.C., that, they had an internal medicine doctor who converted her practice and that they loved it. It was just such an amazing thing. And when they moved to Nashville, they were looking and they couldn't find anything. And I was like, well, what's concierge medicine? I had no idea what that was. I had not ever heard of it outside of maybe like a TV show or something. And when they explained it to me, it kind of piqued my curiosity, and I leaned into kind of studying it and like, oh my gosh, this is real. And like, there may not be one in my town, but they're kind of everywhere in other big towns. And this feels like a model that I could really thrive in. All the while, I was still doing the emergency room, trying to get my entrepreneurial feet under me and become a businessman, which was something I had never really done. And so once I'd spent about 2 years from the point of was introduced to the idea, kind of contemplating what that would mean for me if I was to build something like that. In the interim, I switched from a traveling ER guy to a medical director of a facility because I really wanted control of the schedule. And with this concierge model where you have access, it was really important to me to be able to get most of my working hours during the business week available. So that meant a lot of nights and weekends because I still had to provide for my family. And so I think it was such a compelling idea and something I really identified with, that it was worth at that point really going all in and kind of burning the boats, as they say, to build this out. And so while in the emergency department, I built out the practice, and that gentleman who introduced the idea to me, he and his family was my very first family as paying members, and then one by one. And then I did that for about 4 years while running the department. And then there was enough momentum on the concierge side for me to walk away from the ER full time around 2021.
That's awesome. Let's kind of take a little bit on the entrepreneurial side and talk about that. And then if it's okay with you, I'd love to talk about kind of the medical side, because there's two things you've really developed in unique expertise. And one is the concierge medicine. You have one of the most successful practices in the country. And the other is kind of the entrepreneurial side of things, both the care and the business side of things. On the business side of things, what did it take for you to get started? How much capital? How much of your time? What was the first year like as starting your own practice?
Yeah, I took a path that in my experience is only one of two paths that one can take. I mean, you either start from the ground up with nothing, or you have an existing patient population and you convert it. And a certain percentage of them convert with you, and you immediately have some cash flow. My route is the hardest, building from nothing. But it was something that was worth it to do. And so the capital was provided by me and my working in the ER. So it was a real investment of my time and effort in exchange for shift work to stabilize my family, but also cash flow the business. I mean, there was a small business loan in the very, very beginning, maybe $200,000. The majority of that was for build out, because I had this conviction that I needed a beautiful physical space and the value of the presence of that space and for a place for people to go. Even though I knew some people wouldn't ever kind of visit the office much, I saw that there was value in having that physical space. So it was cash flow plus about $180,000 line of credit on the very, very beginning.
And did you get that from a bank or from the building, or where did you get the
I got it from my banker, just an SBA loan. And it's just funny. I remember the experience was like, this is like, I don't know if anybody's had experience with SBA loans. And like on one hand, it's really great because there's money available, but it's a process. And I remember going through the process thinking, I just probably would have worked a few extra shifts than gone through this process. But nonetheless, I took the loan and then paid it off. But yeah, and I think our first year of revenue, I'd have to look at the numbers. I think we did about $200,000 or $300,000 in revenue.
That's pretty amazing, because that's almost all profit for you, I would assume. I mean, you're the doctor, you're paying your rent, but outside of that, I would assume.
Well, yeah, I had the rent. Even. It took about. I remember because I had one staff member who was a nurse, who was a dear, like she's still with me. She was my first kind of significant hire, and she's really been the backbone. And she was basically running the office, answering the phone, always there when I was in the emergency room, and working as an extension for me, and really allowed me to do both and manage both at the same time. I think it probably took about 18 months to pay for her and pay for the rent and pay for the servicing of the debt and the kind of all of the things. And then of course, I'm spending money on marketing. I'm trying to figure out, like, I still have a lot of things I'm trying to learn, which in the beginning, you spend a lot of money to learn. Um, so, but I didn't take a paycheck. I didn't take a paycheck for, I'd have to look at the math, but probably 3 years, 3.5 years. I was very, very intentional that I didn't want to create any drag on our cash flow, because the ER, like, the big milestone for me was the business is paying for itself. That was like breathing a whole nother layer of oxygen, because I had the ER to provide for me and my family, and I felt protective of that cash flow as we were building. And then I remember when I got my first paycheck, Jen, her name is Jen, she's like, you need to take a check. And it was like the first time we have a picture of it. It was pretty cool. And I think all entrepreneurs at some point, whether you pay yourself out of working capital in the beginning or you wait until you're profitable before you take a paycheck, there is something about that, like, this business is real and it's paying for itself. And like, this is truly out of the overflow. This is not hurting the business at all to take proceeds out. But it took about 3.5 years for us.
One of the things that I see, and I've been kind of talking with a lot of different doctors, concierge, direct primary care, and just kind of going through the data, it seems to me that if you currently have a practice, you can convert about 15 to 20% roughly into a direct primary care function. And, if you're going from free to, call it 150, $200 a month, I think it's probably a lot harder to convert a traditional practice to a high-end concierge, where I actually think that you're probably best kind of going ground up the way that you did it. But if you're going to go DPC or direct primary care, it seems much more logical for a doctor to go from a traditional practice. You've got 2,000 or 3,000 patients under care, and you're going to convert those to 400 to 600 of actual paying direct primary care. But I don't think it's that easy to shift from a standard direct primary care to a concierge, unless you have kind of a really high-end clientele naturally. Right. Like, if you're based out of New York or based out of San Francisco, that's probably an easier convert. But for kind of middle city like Nashville, where you're based, I think it'd be a little bit more challenging unless you really had that clientele under management just to start with. I mean, that's at least my hypothesis.
I think you're right. I think I'm sure the data would support that. I haven't seen it and I haven't studied it, and my only experience was just starting from ground zero. But it does seem like, in order of diminishing friction, it would be like, a high-end offering would be kind of the least conversion. A hybrid model where there's some insurance with a very, very low annual retainer would probably be the next easiest. Just from the psychology of, at least I can use it a little bit, I'm not taking it at all. Even if it was the same membership fee, I do feel like, whether that's $2-3 a year plus or minus insurance. I think if you do $2-3 a year plus insurance, you probably have a higher conversion, but you're also still beholden to insurance. And so I always tell people, like, cause I end up getting a lot of doctors who are considering the model, help me think about this. I always say, like, in my opinion, the number one question a doctor has got to answer for themselves is, what are we going to do with insurance? Because, are we going to take it or are we not? And even though it's probably the hardest question to answer, I think it's the highest yield question to answer, because so many decisions downstream will be based on where are your revenue sources coming from, and then how do you message that? How do you kind of communicate that to your people? And what kind of environment 5 years from now do you want to be practicing in? And I think it's important for folks to think that through. And I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. I think there's a right or wrong answer for the individual. For me, it was very clear when I went through that exercise, I don't want anything to do with insurance. Mostly because they don't have my goals in mind, they don't have my values in mind, and they certainly don't have consistently patient values and goals in mind. And I just didn't want to be in an environment where there were stakeholders in that relationship that didn't have the same goals. It just felt like a lot of inherent friction that would be caused.
Yeah,
And
I think that makes a lot of sense because when I think about it from my perspective, it, you have pretty much full control over the experience with your customers today, and you're outside of the insurance game, right? So you never touch insurance at Brentwood,
Mhm.
is that correct?
Yeah, including Medicare. We've actually opted out of Medicare formally, so we can't take Medicare. It's not that we don't. We said we will not take it. Um,
And so that allows you to control the experience, which
right.
if you think about things from just an operational standpoint, it makes sense where you get to control experience start to finish it rather than having like all these intermediaries in play that have probably misaligned or maybe not perfectly aligned interests. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I kind of want to transition from here to the next thing, which with alignment of interests, I think a lot of people that I speak to are just for the first time hearing about concierge medicine. They're just for the first time hearing about direct primary care. The biggest thing that I'm kind of getting is two questions, and I'll just ask the first one at a time. One is, what exactly differentiates coming into Brentwood MD versus going to your standard insurance primary care physician? Can you walk me through a little bit of what a patient should expect from you versus what they're going to get in their standard primary care?
Yeah, I mean, I think I spend a lot of time thinking about this, Josh. There's a long list of things that are differentiators, but I think if I really use my brain to distill it down to the essence of the variables that really drive the majority of different experience, I think it's patient panel size is probably the number one contributor to the different experiences, because ultimately patient panel size will drive time, and and it, the more time a health conscious person has with a talented doctor over a long enough period of time, the quality of thinking, the quality of decision making, and the quality of experience tends to be much more elevated. And obviously that isn't for everyone, because not everybody would prioritize that. If somebody is just looking for the cheapest path to basic care, the concierge model may not be a good fit for them. But if somebody really values access, trust, and relationship that grows longitudinally, and the ability to have access to somebody who knows you personally and has relational context, the amount of precision and quality of thinking and decision making will improve over time. And I think that is really attractive to our ideal kind of members. And I understand that that isn't for everybody, because not everybody prioritizes that. But I think the first unlock is you got to give the doctor and the patient time. And if
So
you're
go from time. I like to kind of quantify things and think about things in like a mathematical perspective. If I'm
Mhm.
thinking about and just keeping numbers super rough, or like round and very even for your average person to understand, let's assume your average doctor is going to put in 2,000 hours a year of work throughout the year, and that's going to be their time frame allocated to patients. So if we make this assumption, and I think, rough math, that's 40 hours a week times 50 weeks, right? That's how we get to that math, just for real simplicity. If your average doctor has 2,000 patients, that means they can allocate 1 hour per year per patient. And you break that down like on a quarterly basis, and you're thinking about, you're going to allocate 15 minutes of time to each patient per quarter. That's almost nothing. That's really challenging to balance in your head. And you contrast that with your practice, and we'll say that your practice holds a maximum, give or take, of 200 patients. All of a sudden, you have 10 hours per patient per year. You're
Yep.
thinking about your patient, instead for 15 minutes, you're thinking about your patient for 2.5 hours a quarter, or almost an hour a month of dedicated time. That's a complete flip when you think about the level of care that you could receive just on a mathematical basis
Yep.
of you actually know your patients.
Yeah, it's area under the curve, right? I mean, I think what also needs to be in this math kind of thinking exercise is that's a 40-hour week of just patient care. In a model where you are beholden to third-party payers, you have to document and create. There's a lot of documentation time that goes beyond patient care. I would argue, even in my model, where we have that kind of math for thoughtful patient-specific care, if I did 40 hours a week of patient-related care thinking time, I still have to allocate some time for documentation. But we have the ability to really leverage speed and efficiency in how we document. And so, but when you're in a system where it's just fraught with inefficiencies, I mean, a doctor with 40 hours of patient care, there's probably another 50% more time spent in documenting. So these 40-hour patient care weeks really come into 60-hour work weeks, which is not uncommon. And when reimbursements continue to go down and the amount of work to document goes up, it's kind of this functionally bankrupt kind of equation where the only lever you can pull on is be faster so you can see more people, or be faster so that you can get through the day and have something left to give to your family. But yeah, I mean, I think practically what ends up happening is that people come into our world and it is not uncommon for people to say after their very first visit, I have never had this much time and attention of a doctor before. And, maybe we're sitting there 2-3 hours, just getting to know each other, getting their history, spending time together. They're learning me, I'm learning them. And what ends up happening is deeply human. And it trust is kind of the bedrock of any meaningful human relationship, in my opinion. And trust requires time spent, and you can't kind of rush the trust. And we honor that need for time. And, patients start looking a lot like friends, start looking a lot like family, because we really know the nuances. We understand what they're afraid of. We understand what they want to achieve. We understand kind of, and we're comprehensively like exploring. We have space for curiosity. One of the things that really is an advantage of this model where we have a lot of time baked in is, I've been thinking a lot about this recently, and you and I haven't talked about this offline, but I do think about, there's such a surge in the wellness, longevity, kind of biohacking. People are wildly curious about. There's a lot of attention going on, and there's a lot of noise. Like, how do you find signal in all of that? And you certainly aren't going to have space in a traditional high volume practice to say, hey, doc, like, help me think through this. Is this for me? Is it not for me? Like, what am I not thinking about? There's just no room for that. And so I think time is the great differentiator between a membership-based model and an insurance-based model. And I think the number one contributor to your time equation is the patient panel size. So
yeah. As I think about this from my perspective, in a traditional care model, you've said this a lot of times, it's more sick care than it is health care. If I have a traditional PCP, I go to them when I am sick, but for me being sick, I do not kind of reach out to them. When I reach out to them, it's almost a very specific manner of, hey, I'm sick with A, B, and C. Can you take care of me? If you can't, then I go to an urgent care, then I go to an ER. I mean, there's this obvious expansion in these urgent care models, which I actually think come from the fact that you can't easily get in touch with most of your PCPs. And even if you go to the doctor, you're often not even seeing the doctor, you're seeing the nurse's assistant, you're seeing the physician assistant, and you may not even get to interact with the doctor.
Right.
And so this is also true of these urgent cares. You go to an urgent care and it's pretty rare you get seen by a doctor, if at all. And so the ability to have access to your doctor, not just when you're sick, but also to kind of ensure you're not getting sick. On a level from that, can you talk a little bit about kind of how people have access to you? If I'm one of your patients, do I call the nurse? Do I text you? How does, if I'm your patient, how do I get in touch with you if I need something?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's a fair question, both from a patient standpoint and a physician who's considering the model, because it's one of the big things is like, wait a minute, everyone has direct access to you? How does that work? Like, how do you like ever have boundaries? And there's math and science to it, and obviously expectations and boundaries, and you have to, like, whatever your style is. But if Josh is my patient and he has a need, Josh has full permission to text me or call me 24 hours a day. You can call me anytime. You can text me anytime. However, I do sleep. And when I'm sleeping, like I wouldn't expect someone to call me if they're having an emergency. I tell them in advance, Josh, if you're having an emergency, don't call me. Call EMS. You know, you can text me, and then as soon as I wake up, like I'll help you. But like, don't wait for me for your emergency. You know, if there's some time sensitive thing, you have the ability to contact us, but we have a messaging platform for our members. It's kind of like a Slack, you know, where our member only HIPAA compliant messaging platform, where instead of being beholden to Aaron Wenzel seeing this thing when he's asleep, that's unreliable. But we have a tool where Josh could send in and you can alert it that it's urgent and it'll page me. And then I have a mechanism to wake me up because I'm being paged. But like, I take care of a lot of people who travel all over the world. They're on different time zones. They're successful entrepreneurs. Oftentimes their most productive hours are 11 p to 1 a. And I'm asleep. I'm an old man. I'm up super early. I go to bed super early. I'm very disciplined around that. But if you have something, you know, you want to, oh yeah, I need that med refill or that thing, you may be just catching up on your to-do list and you don't expect me to respond. You're just getting it off your to-do list. Yeah, you text me. That's fine. You know, so we have found it is better to have many eyes on one channel than having one set of individual sets of eyes on many channels. And so we have this messaging platform where literally me, my care coordinator, which is a nurse, all the other care coordinators that work for the other doctors, we have a triaging system to where it would be very unlikely if you messaged we call it the care text line. If you message the care text line, that you won't, it would be uncommon to not get a response within 1 or 2 minutes. It would be unheard of to not get a response within an hour.
Which is crazy because, you know, as you know, I'm building out this platform, NextMD. This is where this blog is going to be featured. And I'm going through the data. I mean, there are some states where you're waiting 10, 15, 20 days on average to see your primary care doctor. I was just talking with a friend out in New York, and he was saying that his wife got sick and they said that they could see her in 2 to 3 weeks. And he was just like, this is in 2 or 3 weeks. What
I'm sick
use
today.
is that? Right. I'm sick today. This also brings me into a question as to one of the things that I see as a really strong value proposition for the concierge model that you and I have spoken with offline. It's not just the amount of hours you have, but if I have a chronic illness, something that's challenging to deal with, you as my primary care doctor, even though you may not be a specialist in that category, am I accurate that you can help assist with recommending these specialists, or you've relationships with specialists, or you used to work at the hospital and you have, like, tell me how that works if somebody has a chronic condition and they come to you, and what is the value proposition there versus handling on their own?
I mean, real life scenario, literally, as I was sitting down here before loading to have this conversation, I was coordinating between a member of mine who texted me last night at 8:30 and said, hey, I just talked to Dr. So-and-so about some recent testing we had done. I'm pretty concerned. Let's circle up to talk about it when you get a chance. And I texted him back and I said, no problem. I'm happy to do that. I'll connect with him tomorrow and then I'll coordinate. Well, it just so happened I reached out to the doctor this morning and I was like, hey, let me know when you have 5-10 minutes. You know, patient's kind of nervous. just want to walk through kind of your point of view and what he texts me back. He's like, yeah, you free now? So I hop on the call. 5-7 minutes. And I have the total download of what the latest is from the consult note. And I text my patient and I said, hey, I'm about to hop on a meeting real quick, but can I call you when I'm done? I spoke with the guy you spoke with last night. We're all on the same page and I'll help you walk through this. I just think it's a real great example of like having an advocate. I know the specialist well. I know he's a great practitioner. I know he's very, very good at his craft. I also have communicated with him hundreds of times, so I understand his communication style. I understand like the messaging, and I have access to him. So it's just like network effect. Ultimately, the net result is my patient, within like literally 12 hours of reaching out to his person, me, we are now setting up a follow-up discussion where I've already confirmed with the specialist, coordinated like all of these things to give a deeply personal, bespoke response to something that is troubling him for an issue that he's afraid of. And it's just not, you just can't, how did that happen? I have time, you know? And
Well, it's not just time. I think I think that you're also realizing part of your value proposition is connecting with these other people. Where
yeah,
if I'm a standard primary care doctor, my goal is to get as many people through as possible. If I happen to know of somebody, maybe I'm able to spend an extra 5-10 minutes. But you just think about the math, and you know, even the scenario I gave proposes that there's an equal amount of paperwork and administrative work for both a primary care doctor in a traditional sense and a concierge. And that's not accurate. I mean, even realistically, you might be looking at less than 15 minutes of work. You might be looking at 10 minutes of order with that. And I think that's actually something that's like really underrated that I think a lot of people miss when it comes to concierge medicine or even direct primary care is when you're sick, you're not going to function at the same level as you were prior to being sick. Obviously, you're sick, right? But that means you probably need assistance navigating an unfamiliar system more than at any other time. And unless you have a family member that can really navigate this eloquently, you're really just kind of at a little bit of luck and just where you show up and who takes care of you versus having somebody who's kind of being thoughtful throughout the entire process of how everything looks.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Yesterday, I was having a meeting with somebody, and I asked him. I said, he's a newer member to our practice. He's a referral to me, but I'm full, so we kind of brought him in and matched him up with a really great doc. And I'm just like, hey, man, how's this experience been for you? And he was giving me some feedback about everything that he loved. And I said, if you were to distill it down into like a bumper sticker, like what would be like at this point, what's the highest value this is offered, provided for you? And he said, it's access, but not just to my doctor. I have a strong confidence that if I reach out to my doctor, I'm either going to get an answer or I'm one phone call away from that doctor making to get the answer. And it provides him a lot of confidence as he goes out and builds and does his thing that either his doctor is going to know the answer or his doctor will know who to call to get the answer. And so this real network effect, it's more than just access to your doctor. It's access to your doctor's network and all the relationship equity I have professionally. These folks can tap into that. And it's not just my members, but my members get access to all of my other doctors' networks, which are not the same. And so there's this real compounding effect as we grow that we actually get more powerful in our ability to move thoughtfully and quickly. And I always say, in your time of need, speed is the game. Speed is everything. Speed, 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 speed. And so we seem to be getting faster as we grow, which excites me about the model because it just means more and more people's lives are being positively impacted.
No, I think that's really thoughtful to think about because part of your job is connecting people. And so you build a competency in that. It isn't just oh, this one-off thing, Mr. Jones, it needs an X-ray and an ortho, but you've gone through 20 people and you have a really great ortho and you have a really great PT that you recommend, and kind of like full cycle or oncology or whatever the need might be, you have connections within that ecosystem.
Right.
I want to, I know we're kind of heading into like the tail end of the time period here, but I want to kind of ask you, as an entrepreneur and a doctor, what is the best and the worst thing about running a concierge medical practice from your perspective?
I mean, this is purely like a personal, the best thing for me is that I've been able to build my dream business. You know, something that that I care deeply about, like the subject matter, like my craft, I care deeply about it. I care deeply about the people who are impacted by it. I care deeply about the team who helps me deliver it. And I am deriving kind of immeasurable satisfaction and joy from building something that I know is positively impacting the members and the care team in parallel. And it grows, and with growth comes not less impact, but more. And it's just kind of this, it's just a lot of fun building something that seems healthy. I liken it a lot to like this paternal, you know, it's similar to someone saying like, hey, what are the things that make you proud about your sons? Oh man, geez. I mean, here are the things that like they're growing into being great young men, and like they're like, I derive a lot of satisfaction from growing a team and seeing them thrive in their effort of caring for other people. So I think the answer to what is the best thing about it is it has allowed me to create my dream business, and in doing so, secondarily, I would say I've learned something really, really important about myself that I don't think I would have ever truly understood about me. And that is I love being a businessman, and I love solving problems, and I love doing it in a way with teamwork and like with unique ability and with the ability to like solve complex things through really elegant solutions and elegant teamwork. I don't know that I would have fully appreciated that aspect about me. I think did you ask also what's the worst part about it?
Or the hardest? Yeah, worst, hardest.
Yeah, I would say
whatever you feel comfortable with.
I would say the hardest thing for me to solve in the first few years has been how isolating entrepreneurship can be. It's very lonely. It's a lot of work, and it requires incredible focus of attention. And in the early days, I was not very good at figuring out how to keep my prioritization of my own health, my marriage, being a father, friends, hobbies. Now I eventually have figured out how to kind of bring that back in and find this really nice harmony between them, and not at the cost of another thing, because they're all of those things I mentioned are, for me, they're essential. But when you burn the boats and you go all in your business, it can become all consuming. There's a lot of practical reasons, right? Like you don't want it to fail. But for me, it was really isolating. There were seasons where I felt really, really alone. Like I like, you know, it all stops with you, starts with you. It's driven by you. And, so I'd say that was the hardest part.
I think that's really logical, because entrepreneurship can be incredibly challenging because you get into these ecosystems where you don't get immediate feedback in a positive manner, or you might get positive feedback, but it's not tied to you earning more money. Where, you know, if you take a job and you get a raise, you instantly make that much. You're guaranteed that. You're part of a group of people that are all at your level.
Right.
You have peers. You have people that you could look up to, or, you know, mentor down. And there's kind of a rule book that you've come in by. And then something I hear a ton with entrepreneurs is it can be very lonely. So I really do greatly appreciate that. I want to leave a little bit of space. We probably have about 5-10 more minutes left for anything that you want to share, just kind of wrapping up, closing. What what it means to you, anything that you think is really important, just kind of as a message about yourself, your business, anything, leave it open from your side.
Yeah, I think for for those that would be listening that are providers, whether you're a physician, nurse practitioner, PA, nurse, um, and you are practicing in a way that doesn't meet a need for you that is deeply satisfying, I'd encourage you to consider this model. It's very unique, and it is not for everyone. But if there's friction in your professional life in terms of satisfaction, making impact, like a better way kind of thing, I'm very evangelical about this model. I think there's a lot of ways to do it. I think there's a lot of entry points. I think there's a lot of structures that could work. I think there are some core elements that make the ones that succeed. But I think there's a lot of ways to kind of do it. I know a lot of physicians, and I often say I'm the happiest doctor I know. And I think happiness matters. And I think a lot of us in the healthcare world, if we've been at it for a minute, we have to actively resist resenting how hard it is and how thankless it can be and how much of a grind and how generic it starts feeling. So if there's friction professionally, I would encourage you to seek out what practicing in this model could look like. Doesn't mean you have to start your own thing. Might mean, hey, seek out who are the people in your market who are doing it at a way that you relate with, and maybe reach out and see, like, are they looking to expand? Obviously, if you're entrepreneurial, maybe you should do your own thing. Because I think there's plenty.
So, really quick question. Actually, two questions. One, are you in your practice hiring if a doctor was interested in coming on, or you guys expanding and growing or bringing on more doctors? And the second question is, even if someone wasn't looking to directly work for you, are you open to doctors reaching out to you personally to get a feel for these things?
Yeah, I mean, first question is, yes, we're hiring. I think we're in a position now where we have hit a critical threshold where we will likely be looking to hire a doctor probably every 12 to 18 months in the foreseeable future, just with the market demand and our growth. By extension, that means we need more care support teams, so nurses, potentially phlebotomists, office support. So we are definitely hiring. We have a careers page on our BrentwoodMD.com. If you're interested, you could inquire there, submit a CV, just drop us a line, and we'll be in touch. And in terms of mentorship, it's something I really, I probably need better boundaries with it. But it is something that I do really enjoy, mentoring and offering. I have a general rule. I'll talk to just about anybody once, but you don't get a second call unless you've acted on the things we talked about. And that's fine if you don't. It's just I'll probably be done giving. But I tend to have a deep well of willingness to give if it's meaningful to the individual and they take action on it. So if somebody has some questions, I'm generally try to make myself available at least for that first call. I'll give you a first call.
Aaron, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me and to kind of educate me on everything on your practice and how you've built it. It's been great to watch you as a friend, to grow your business. And I just want to say I really appreciate you taking the time to hop on this.
It's mutual, Josh. I appreciate you. I mean, you're one of the smartest guys I know. I really love what you're doing with this company you're building. I think it's going to fill a need for people who want to know more about this model of care, and then connecting the providers with the people who are looking for the care. And I think there's magic in that, to be that conduit. So I'm really excited about the platform you're building. I'm really excited about that.
Thanks. I'm really excited about it too. I mean, I think there's this kind of unique thing that is counterintuitive. Concierge medicine and direct primary care feel new, but they're not. Like, if you look at medicine, the history of medicine over like 2,000 plus years,
Hmm.
for all but a small time period, most doctors had a pretty small book of people within their village, within their tribe, within their
Right.
small ecosystem that they're caring for. 50, 100, 300 people.
Hmm.
It's kind of a newer thing in the last 30 years where you've come about these doctors that are having to try to split their time across 3,000 people. I think what you're doing is providing a really high quality service that's deeply needed
Yeah.
and should be incredibly valued by people. And so I think what you're doing is great.
That's awesome, man. Thank you, Josh. Thanks for having me, and look forward to chatting again soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks, man.